This fiddler's convention is boring me out of my skull. I've got what, like 3-4 hours to go before the string band part starts? So what could I do until then? I could go to town, I could go and get some overpriced hot bar food from Whole Foods, I could go to a music store. Maybe they'd have some cool stuff at the music store. Yeah, I think I'm going to go to the music store. Alright, we're at the music store. What do we got here? Same old shit mostly, it seems. They still got that Silverface Super Reverb that's been sitting here for a year. Sorry you haven't found a home yet, Silver Super Reverb. They got a Tweed Princeton going for under $3,000. Okay, that's actually insane. If I had $3,000, I would buy it. Wait, what's that over there? Oh, hey, it's one of those Celestion Blue speakers. Yeah, I know the story. They're associated with Vox amps. And they are selling this for $200. That is dirt cheap for one of these speakers. And plus, it looks like it's a really old one, too. I'm gonna buy it. You can never have too many guitar speakers. The tone chase is eternal. Yep, I got a Blue. And yes, I really did get this thing for $200. That was how much the shop sold it to me. Pretty nuts, since a brand new one of these is like $320 right now from Sweetwater. And also, the shop was selling it as a vintage one. And I thought that it was a vintage one too, because, at first I looked at the date code, I looked at the location of the date code, which is here on the gasket. And if your Celestion speaker has its date code on the gasket, that usually means it's a pretty old one, like we're talking 60s old. And after looking up the Celestion date code guide on bygonetones.com, right in there in the store, I thought that this speaker was a 1967 specimen. The shop told me that that was about right, but then after a little bit closer of a look, I realized that this thing could not be that old for a couple reasons. One, the sticker on it says Celestion Alnico Blue. Back in the 60s, these speakers were not actually called the Alnico Blue. Speakers of this type were, at the time, of course, found in Vox amps, and they had Vox stickers on them. They did not have any mention of Alnico or Blue on them. That is a label that Celestion applied to this speaker when they began reissuing it in the 90s. The second giveaway that this is not a vintage specimen is the terminals. The terminals are a very obvious modern configuration. Celestion terminals on 60s speakers looked very different than these ones do. And the third giveaway that this isn't a vintage specimen is the model number. 60 Celestion Blues like you would find in Vox amps of the time were model T530. This thing is model T4427, which is the standard modern Blue model number. And as it turns out, modern Celestion Blues and other Alnico models also have their date codes printed on the gasket and not on a magnet sticker like most other Celestion models have it nowadays. Which would mean that, according to the date code on this speaker, it was manufactured sometime in 2002. So at this point it's decently aged, probably had a fair amount of time to break in, but it's not a vintage specimen, despite what the shop sold it to me as. Thank God I didn't pay vintage prices for it. Maybe the shop knew that it wasn't vintage deep down and, they just wanted it to sell fast. I have no idea. But anyway, this is exciting. A 15 watt, very low powered compared to the other speakers that I have, guitar speaker that is most commonly associated with a type of music and type of tone that I almost never mess with. So how's it gonna adapt to my equipment and what I play? Well, let's find out. Let's make a recording. My immediate impression is that this thing has some pretty serious bite to it. It's got a lot of information up there in the treble and upper mids, but it's what I like to call tastefully bright. That is, you know, it's not just fizz up there. Like, there's actual presence and mid-range going on, too. It's not like, say, a T75 where, you know, there's lots of fizziness up there, lots of information in the top end, but there's kind of a hole in the mid-range. Now, this thing has a voice to it. It's almost vintage 30-like in a way, which is interesting because I'm fairly certain that when Celestion originally made the vintage 30, when they conceived it, it was meant to kind of be similar to their old Alnico models, like this thing. An interesting thing that I discovered while I was recording that little sound demo was placing the microphone at my usual distance that I place it from the speaker, which is maybe close to a foot or so, didn't work out all that well. It made the whole thing sound weaker and less impactful in the top end. It was sounding really good on the rhythm channel of my amp. So I want to explore that a little bit further, but I think what I'm going to do is try and do some speaker combinations with it. So I want to compare it now with the darkest speaker that I own, which is my 2003 Vintage 30, and maybe even combine the two speakers, see if I can get some kind of cool sound doing that. And eventually, of course, you know, I will do, you know, a full mix demo, because I always do one when I do these videos, because you got to hear how the speaker sounds in a full mix. So I will be doing that, but first I'm going to transfer this speaker over to the Marshall 4x12 and see how it sounds in there, and also see how it sounds when stacked up to the 2003 Vintage 30. Do some comparisons and stuff. Let's do that now. Alright, that was pretty cool. It kind of did exactly what I hoped it would, which is just give some extra presence and bite to the darker Vintage 30 sound. The high bumps on both the speakers ended up adding together in a really nice way, and since there's no weirdness in the mid-range going on really with the blue, that was kind of left untouched. It kind of just added together. So that was very cool. I think that's the combination that I'm going to use for my final full mix that I'm going to do, or at the very least blend in a little bit of Vintage 30 to the blue. But what I want to do now is compare it to all the other speakers in my cabinet. The 2003 Vintage 30, the 2001 Vintage 30, and the two 2021 Vintage 30s, one Chinese and one Mesa. I want to compare those to the blue, and I'm going to do it by putting them all in the same cabinet slot and not moving the microphone. I'm also going to use an SM57 this time. I just want to hear what the blue sounds like in comparison to all of them. Then after that, I'll put the full mix together and then break it down and give you my thoughts. right, now you've heard the full mixes, I've heard the full mixes, and I can say now that I like the Blue. It's a good speaker for what I do, I think. Normally, I don't like bright sounding guitar speakers or like bright sounding guitar tones in general, but the Blue really does it in a way that I enjoy. It's really bright, that's for sure, but this particular one isn't that spiky, if you will. Can't really describe it any better than that. It's just got a healthy high boost, and that's all it's got. There's no weirdness going on in the mids. There's no whooshing or whistling frequencies I have to take out, really. That full mix, by the way, the only EQ I had going on the guitars in that full mix was simple low and high pass, and neither were all that extreme. The second one that I did with the 2003 Vintage 30 blended in made the high bump a little bit wider and added a little bit more mids and tamed the top end a little bit. And because I did the thing that I like to do where if I've got two speakers or two microphones in a guitar tone that I've recorded, I pan one pair of tracks less towards the left and right so that you get some information coming at you from the center as well, not just hitting you left and right. The Vintage 30 and Blue combo sounded a bit denser, but the Blue still stood up real well on its own. And when compared to the other Vintage 30s that I have and the other speakers that I have, honestly, I feel like the Blue did bright the best. Usually the 2003 one's the one that I go for because I can hit it real hard with a really aggressively bright sound and it won't ever get harsh. It'll take it really gracefully because it's kind of a dark speaker. But the Blue gives me that hard-hitting, aggressive top end without me having to push my highs and without me having to do much EQ trickery to make it not unpleasant up there. It's a shame it's so low-powered, though, and that it's 16 ohms. I was having to do an impedance mismatch in the Marshall cabinet the whole time. All the other speakers in the cabinet were 8 ohms. But hey, at least I've got it in my arsenal now. At least I know it's a good tool to use. That's about all I have to say. If you enjoyed the video, do all the usual YouTube bullshit, leave a comment, tell me what you thought of the sounds that I produced. Let me know what your guitar speaker experience is and your Alnico Blue experiences if you have one. If you really like what you see, then subscribe as always, because I have tons more videos like this planned. Like this channel actually has a direction now. It's just a question of when I can get my hands on the materials to do the videos that I want to do, and when I can get the motivation to pull myself together enough to finish one of these videos. I have depression.